Bava Metzia Peizayin Amud Aleph. Okay, with this, Adran Alach, these 4 dapim of Bava Metzia, we've been on them for a solid 3 months now or so. This is the last shiur in this section, and then the Bava Metzia goes back to Alachot, and then we'll have another couple of shiurim in this Masechta in the later dapim. If anyone who was here last week, so just on Shavuot night, so which is in 2 weeks, so one of the slots, the midnight slot, so Bezat Hashem will be speaking, giving kind of last week's shiur with a bit more. I can do every year. Yeah, but I think I'll do last week's shiur instead of learning it together. I don't know, unless you guys want to actually learn a sugya together. I haven't done before.
Sunday night, not Monday night.
No, we should discuss. We can do learning like we've done in previous years, and if anyone's interested, talk about it. Okay, so this week what we're going to be talking about is that there are certain aspects of the human condition that are generally regarded as evils or ills, and one of the questions that's raised is, how could the world have been created with these terrible things, right? If Hashem is a benevolent God, so then why do these things exist? And there's really 2 ways to address that question, right? One way is to reject the premise and say these things that you think are bad are actually not bad, but are actually good, or at least that the benefit outweighs the downside. And the other is to say that, okay, these things are evil, but God didn't create them. Right? They come from some other place. And what I think is interesting about our Gemara, and then we'll elaborate on it in various other midrashim, is that it takes both of those answers and combines them together. At least that's the way I understand it. It's going to ask questions about things like illness and affliction and suffering, and it's going to say, on the one hand, Hashem didn't create those during Sheshit Yemei Bereshit, but if He didn't create them, how do they exist? And the answer is that He actually did create them, but as a result of the request of mankind. That there were certain tzaddikim who requested these things, and so Hashem didn't refuse the request of the tzaddikim. But then, if they were requested by the tzaddikim and Hashem created them, so then why were they requested and why did Hashem agree? And so that's what we're going to be learning now, but on kind of the almost theological level, I think that's what's behind these midrashim. Okay, so we'll start now with Bava Metzia Daf Pei Zayin Amud Aleph. So we've been learning about Avraham Avinu, and so the section of Bava Metzia that talks about Avraham Avinu, it ends as follows. Ad Avraham lo ya zikna. There was no such thing as old age until Avraham came along. This doesn't mean that people didn't get old, it meant that people did not age. In other words, they looked young their entire lives. Until Avraham came along and he looked old. Why is that the case? It used to be that people, since Avraham and Yitzchak looked very similar to each other, so it used to be that people wanted to talk to Avraham and they ended up talking to Yitzchak. And vice versa. There was no way to tell them apart. So even though Avraham was 100 when Yitzchak was born, because people didn't age, they looked identical. So Avraham came and asked for mercy. In other words, he asked for the process of physical aging. So what does it mean, ba bayamim? So it means that he wasn't just old, but also he looked old. It was a new phenomenon that Hashem brought into the world as a result of Avraham's tefillah. Next, Ad Yaakov lahava chulsha. There was no weakness until Yaakov came along. At Yaakov,
is this weakening with age?
Yes, it means getting sick in your old age. Yes. At Yaakov ba'aracham. Yaakov davened for there to be a weakening in old age. Have a chulsha shneimar. Really, chulsha shouldn't be translated as weakening. It should be illness. Really. Shneimar vayomer leYosef hine avicha chola. Right. Yaakov was on his deathbed. He became sick when he was old, and so the claim of the Gemara is that A, that didn't exist before Yaakov's time, and B, Yaakov davened for it actively, and that's why it happened to him. Okay. Third example, Ada ata Elisha lo hava dechalesh v'itpak. Until Elisha came along, there was no such thing as someone who became deathly ill and recovered from it. Ata Elisha ba'aracham v'itpak. But then Elisha came along, he davened for it, and he was able to recover for the first time. Right? It says when Elisha died, he got sick from the illness that he was to die from, which implies that he had gotten deathly ill that he had recovered from previously. That Elisha got sick 3 times. אחד שדחפו לגחזי בשתי ידיו, one time because he pushed Gehazi away. I won't get into the story. There's a whole story about with Naaman and Sarah. He pushes Gehazi away with two hands, meaning fully. He doesn't give him a chance to do tshuva. So he got sick from that. Ve'echad shegera dubin batinokot. This is the story we always come back to, right? That he, the fact that he sicked the bears onto those 42 children, he got sick as a punishment for that. Ve'echad shemet bon, one just from his natural old age that he died from. Shneimar v'lishchalat chol yo asher yamut bo. Okay, ad kan. All right. So one thing that I want to note, and we'll give an answer now, is it says, there's three things here. There's Avraham with old age, there's Yaakov with illness or weakness, and then Elisha with recovering from illness. At least with Avraham, the Gemara gives some rationale, right? It says, why did Avraham want to get old age? Because everyone was confusing him and Yitzchak, and he said it doesn't make sense. But no reason is given here for why Yaakov asked to get sick when he was dying.
That makes sense.
Why does it make sense?
Probably he was suffering because of Yosef, so he just wanted to die. So he said, do it. Give me some, I want to suffer.
So I just asked to die. Why does he need to be sick?
Because maybe he wanted to suffer, but maybe it's some, I don't know, maybe some faith that Yosef is still alive. Maybe, I don't know, because there's a whole Baymaen thing over there.
Okay. I think you're on the right track, yeah.
Because you know that old people, when they're old, when they're sick, when they die.
Right. That's true.
So we wanted to die, so instead he just said, can they be sick?
Right. Okay. That's a good suggestion.
I would say that he wanted to die a natural death, but sooner. But it wasn't natural sickness.
Right. Okay. So if we look now at Bereshit Rabbah, it's actually at the bottom of the page here. So it elaborates. It gives a reason for Yaakov. It swaps Elisha with Chizkiyahu, actually, which we'll deal with, and it adds Yitzchak. Right. Another thing that doesn't have here, it skips Yitzchak in the middle. Right. So it gives So we'll learn that now. Bereshit Rabbah. No. It has Avraham, Yaakov, and Elisha. So Yitzchak is missing. So in Bereshit Rabbah, we'll see it adds Yitzchak, and it also swaps Elisha with Chizkiyahu. So we'll see it now. Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Simon, Perek Samechei. Avraham tava zikna. Okay, so Avraham asked for or demanded old age. Amar lefanav, Ribon ha'olamim, adan uvno nichnasim l'makon, ve'en adam yodea l'mi mechabed. He says, people don't know who to honor, who's the father, who's the son. Because you crown him with old age, physically, physical, right? Not that he lives to an old age, but that he looks old. So then people know who to honor. You've made a good demand, and it starts from you. וכיוון שעמד אברהם נתן לו זקנה, ואברהם זקן בימים. And the Midrash here notes this is the first time the word zikna is found in the Torah. Okay, and that's where it finds kind of the exposition of this idea. Right? It's worth noting here again to tie back to kind of how I started the shiur. Right? On its surface, you would say, he gives a justification for why there's value in old age, but you would say that on its own, without this explanation, I would think old age is a bad thing. In other words, the fact that people age, it causes them mental anguish, right? Why is my appearance changing? Why am I balding? Why don't I look the way I used to look? There's a lot of downsides to the process of aging, but the argument here is that the upsides outweigh the downsides, at least that's how I understand it, in the sense that it allows for society to function so that people know who's older and who's younger, and there's value to that. The question becomes stronger when it comes to the following. Okay, Yitzchak tava yisurin. Okay, Yitzchak Avinu, he demanded suffering in the world. Amar lefanav, Ribon kol ha'amim, Adam met belo yisurin, midat adin metucha kenegdo. Right, the way it works today in the world is people just die, there's no suffering, and then they're judged with the full extent of the law, in olam haba. Mitoch she'ata mevi alav yisurim, you need some mechanism to alleviate some of the punishment that they'll receive in the world to come by punishing them in this world. If you have some sort of affliction in this world, then it will make it easier for people in the next world. Okay, so here it's again the same concept where on the surface I look at the world, I see affliction, I see that it's a bad thing, but Yitzchak demands it as a way for people to achieve a cleansing and a kapara in this world, and so that makes them able to enter Olam Haba in the next world. So the upsides of Yisurin outweigh the downsides, right? Mitchilat haSefer v'ad kan ein ktiv Yisurin, right? There's no example of Yisurin until Yitzchak comes along. Kevan she'amar Yitzchak natan lo Yisurim v'hi ki zaken Yitzchak v'tichen elav merot. Yitzchak becomes blind in his old age.
The first time that I see this Perush, but the
I
reason
know
Yitzchak
why.
is blind.
Right.
Usually it's about because of the tears or because some others.
Yeah, we had a
They
whole
didn't
shir.
mention that. They mentioned like maybe it was a chet or משהו
And why
כזה.
he was blind when he was old?
Why?
Because he was old.
But that would fit
Long
with
story
this, by
with
the way.
Avraham and Sarah.
Nachon.
If it was from a chet, Toby, it would fit with this, and you could fit it in.
But you're right. We did do a whole shiur on this this year, I think. Even.
Yeah.
But I think you're correct too. I don't remember if we mentioned this as one of the explanations. All right. He saw the smoke of Esav's wives when they were doing avodah zarah, because with Avimelech that they tricked Avimelech. That we give a whole bunch of reasons. But I don't know if this one it's almost that Yitzchak invited it upon himself, right?
And I guess
as
what
opposed to
David
it being a
Moshe says,
punishment.
it makes sense.
Yeah, but it could go together. Like, if he did things that he should have been punished for, he's saying
He will ask for his
do it
soul.
in this world rather than in the next.
Okay. Yafa?
And Hashem started with his eyes for those reasons.
Yafa. Okay. No, he's asking this not stam, but because he himself felt that he needed it.
I'm saying it doesn't contradict this.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That makes sense. We'll see in the Perushim. I mean, nobody's asked the question yet. We'll see in the this isn't the first time that people suffered in the Torah. I mean, this is pretty early on in the Torah, but there are stories before this. We'll get to this in the Perushim in a bit. Okay. Next, Yaakov tavat acholi. Yaakov demanded illness. Amar lefanav. We saw this in Bava Metzia, right? Amar lefanav. Ibon kol ha'olamim. Adam met belo choli. And look at the explanation he gives here. Ve'eno miyashev ben banav. מתוך שהוא חולה, 2 או 3 ימים, הוא מיישב בין בניו. So why is it good to have, why does there need to be deathly illness in the world? So that people have a chance to get their affairs in order and have a last will and testament. And, if people just, one day they drop dead, then they don't have a chance to get their affairs in order. Right? What it doesn't say here is it also gives people a chance to do tshuva and kind of, reassess that. Could you please not do that? Thank you.
It seems like each one of them asked for something they needed. Like Avraham wanted to be known as Avraham. I don't know who's Yitzchak, so make something so people will know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as David Moshe said, maybe Yitzchak had some, I don't know, maybe he did something wrong, so he wanted to have a kapara, so he asked for Yisurin. And then Yaakov just wanted to have a chance to know where he needs to talk to his sons about all the brachot and everything.
Right.
Ve'acharit hayamim,
Exactly.
one that he didn't see it in the end.
Right.
So,
Yes, there you go. Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense that people would ask for negative things based on their own personal need, right? The chiddush here is that Hashem agrees, I think. And again, kind of my claim is going back to what we said in the beginning, that they're giving explanations for why these things are good, but the Medrash doesn't say Hashem created illness at the beginning of the world. Like, there's a whole list of things in the Pirkei Avot, right? That the Ben Hashmashot, Hashem created the talking donkey and the pit that swallowed up a korach. There were things that were created that only actually actualized later on in history, but in potential were created Ben Hashmashot. That's what the
I would argue that
Pirkei Avot
this falls
says.
under that. Because it doesn't say he created or saying you're asking this thing that exists from me, so I'll bring it down into reality, starting with you.
it's kind of just waiting there and waiting for someone to ask for that.
Yeah.
Okay. I would argue it's saying there was no even potential concept of illness until Yaakov came along and asked for it. And then Hashem said, I'll create it now. But whatever. Yeah. I think
It doesn't say that.
again, fair. In any event, okay, so Amar lei Hakadosh Baruch Hu chayecha davar tov tavata u'mimcha u'matchil v'yomer Yosef hine avicha choler. And Yaakov was sick in his old age. Finally, Amar Rabbi Levi Avraham chidesh zikna, Yitzchak chidesh yisurim, Yaakov chidesh choli. So he summarized the previous statements. Chizkiyahu chidesh choli shitraper. Chizkiyahu, and Elisha was the one who did this in Bava Metzia, is the one who innovated deathly illness that a person can still recover from in a somewhat miraculous way. אמר לו, העמדת אותו עד יום מותו, אלא מתוך שאדם חולה ועומד, הוא עושה תשובה. Okay, so what was his argument to Hashem? By giving someone a deathly illness that he then survives, it gives them the chance to kind of rectify his life and you know. אמר לה הקדוש ברוך הוא, חייך דבר טוב תבעתו ממך, אני מתחיל, הלוא דכתיב, מכתב חזקיהו מלך יהודה, לכלתו ויחי מחוליו. And there's a story where Chizkiyahu becomes deathly ill and he survives. אמר רבי שמואל בר נחמן מכאן, שהיה בין חולי לחולי, חולי כבד משניהם. Okay. Good. So that's the Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah. I want now, sources are a bit out of order this week. If we look at the Chomi Yelamdenu Chaye Sarah, the second to last source. So when Avraham demanded old age, what does that mean? What is the physical, when I say someone's getting old, what is that? How does that make itself? Right.
I guess it's like הרי אני כוונצ'רים שונה, when you had just like a white beard and everything, no?
Okay, good, yeah. So that's what the Midrash here assumes as well, right? So in Tanchum Yomdeinu it says the following. ואין לך אדם שכיוון ליבו ודעתו לתפילה כאברהם אבינו. There was no one who knew how to daven with kavanah like Avraham. שאמר לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, חלילה לך מעשות כדבר הזה. That's in the context of Sodom. Yeah, Avraham really knew how to daven properly. It's interesting, by the way, that the example it gives is when Avraham challenges Hashem about Sodom. That's davening with real kavanah. כיוון שראה הקדוש ברוך הוא שהם מבקש זכות שלא להחריב את העולם, התחיל משבחו ואמר לו, יף יפיד מבני אדם. And Hashem saw that Avraham was trying to be melamed zchut about these people, so Hashem praised Avraham. Amar lo, eze yofi sheli. And Avraham says back to Hashem, what are you telling me that I'm praiseworthy? Ani uvni nichnasin la'ir, ve'en bnei adam mekirim ben av laben. I have no beauty. People, I walk around and people, they think I'm my son. Right? They don't even honor me in that sense. Because in those days, people didn't age. I mean, you assume also, by the way, people were born as babies. In other words, at what point did they stop aging? It's not clear, right? But anyways, Amar Avraham, Ribono shel olam, tzarich ata le'afrish ben ha'av laben u'ben na'ar le'zaken. Right? You need a way to differentiate between different ages. Yitkabed ha'zaken b'na'ar. That the young will honor the old. Amar lo kadosh baruch hu, chayecha mimcha ani matchil. Halach ve'lan be'oto halayla. Avraham went to sleep that night. Ve'amad b'boker. He woke up the next morning. And he saw that suddenly his hair was white on his head and on his beard. Initially, Avram's reaction was one of shock and dismay. And he says, "You've made a spectacle of me. You've made me. What is this? What is this white hair?" Amar lo, Hashem said to him, "Ateret tiferet seva v'hadar zkenim seva." This is a pasuk that. Of course, this is a shock because no one's ever had white hair before, but you should know that this is actually a sign of, of honor and glory and something that's desirable.
How is that even like?
You went into the city, and was like, "What's wrong with this guy?"
Yeah, I don't think people would take it as an old age sign because, it's like, huh? It's just strange.
Right. Yeah. Anyway.
How it's
So.
effective.
How was it effective?
It definitely differentiated between him
And
and
Yitzchak.
Yitzchak.
Right, and nobody knew what it was, and then they
With
learned.
time, people learn that that's what happens.
Yeah. Right.
Could just sleep and wake.
Avraham, what's up with you?
What? What? That was close.
Okay, I want now to look at Tosfot. Okay, so Tosfot, back on the first page. So he asked the following question. Okay, he's going to start dealing with until now we've learned these midrashim. We've just kind of assumed that every statement it makes is true. And Tosfot throws the first attack. Okay, he says as follows. Tosfot's commenting in Bava Metzia that there's a Gemara in Bava Metzia that says that when Avraham was zaken ba bayamim, Hashem berach ad Avraham bakol, and Hashem blessed Avraham with everything. What's bakol? So there's a few different opinions. There's a son, there's a daughter, and then there's one opinion which says that Avraham had this necklace with a stone on the necklace, and anyone who looked at the stone would become healed. This
What's
is
healed?
Healed would feel if they were sick, they would get better. Okay, so that's one of the opinions in the Gemara. So Tosfot asks, "V'im tomar v'hab yimei Avraham akati lo haya choli ba'olam kedem rinan be'asocher tapolim," which is our parak. Dad Yaakov lo hava chulsha v'ad Elisha lo hava di'ich v'iftach. So how can you tell me that Avraham Avinu had this magical stone that anyone who looked at it would be healed? That implies that people were sick. But we just learned that nobody got sick until Yaakov, and nobody got sick and got healed from it until Elisha. So how does that make sense? So rather than just suggesting that it's conflicting midrashim, Tosfot offers two answers. Number one, umatzinan lemeimar dehacha becholeh shel makah ayri. So Avram's stone healed people who had an external injury. Two people got in a fight, and then one of them got a boo-boo. So the stone would heal the boo-boo. But until Yaakov, no one ever got sick with a disease in kind of the internal sense. What?
And was able to recover.
And until Elisha, and then was able to recover. Right. ורבנו תם ורי מפרשים, and they give a different suggestion. דעד יעקב לעבר דאיכליש היינו חולי של מיתה. Okay, so what was unique about Yaakov's illness was that it was a fatal illness. Okay, that he died from it. That people had gotten sick before, they always recovered. מכאן ואילך דאב איכלש חולי של מיתה ולא עבדה דאיתפח עד אלישע. And Elisha's chidush was no one got fatally ill, but then recovered from their fatal illness. In other words, there were illnesses before that, but they were illnesses that people would recover from. But I guess there was still a use in Avraham's amulet to help them recover more quickly or something like that, but nobody got deathly ill until Yaakov came along. Okay, so we see Tosfot is trying to resolve these two ideas. Good? Okay. If we look now at the Perush Maharzu, so actually, no, let's look at the Yifei Torah first, which is the second source on the second page. So the Yifei Torah here, he offers, I think, similar answers, but from a different perspective. So he says in Bereshit Rabbah, in his commentary, he says as follows: "V'hadem atzinu v'yirpa Hashem et Avimelech v'amhotav." There's a story where Avimelech, right, Avraham goes down to Gerar, and then Avimelech takes Sarah, and there's a whole, situation. And then in the end, it says Hashem healed Avimelech and the people of his household because all their wounds were closed up because he had taken Sarah. So Avraham davened, and then their wounds opened up. So here we have an example of people having some sort of illness in the sense that they became barren that needed to be healed. And similarly, Uve Miriam elna refa na'ala, right? Miriam had Sarat and she needed to be healed. So what are you telling me? That, sorry?
It supports Taisus, these anecdotes.
Oh, so?
Because they're makas, they're external.
Okay, good. So, good. We'll see that the Yifei Torah offers a similar suggestion.
Okay.
So, Zehu b'choli ha'mechudash lefi sha'a behashgacha letochachad musar. So his first answer is, these were, divine punishments that they're one-offs, right? They're not like, you can't derive a rule from them. But then he questions his own thing, and he says, "Aval dechizkiya hava choli tivi ki kavu yamav lamud. Uma dichtiv b'torah v'rapo yirapeh." But I have in Parsha Mishpatim, you have people, they get into a fight, and then one of them is going to need healing. If you tell me that no one ever got sick before, these people, Elisha came along and was able to heal from it, so what does v'rapo yirapeh even mean? ובפרק מקום שנגעו תנן חזקיהו גנז ספר רפואות שישע שלמה. There's this idea that there was this book of medicine that was hidden. So his final answer is Yesh lomar de'anau b'makah ba'alma v'acha b'choli hakol kol haguf. Right? There's a difference between some wound or external injury and a proper disease, and that's what we're dealing with. V'hashtanicha nami d'Avimelech Miriam. And really, this answers everything that we said before. Also for Avimelech and Miriam, like David Moshe said. So I want to kind of suggest here that the Yifei Torah is saying the same thing as Tosfot basically, but like the answers are reversed. In other words, Yifei Torah's second answer is the same as Tosfot's first answer. That the difference is if it's an external or an internal wound, and then Tosfot's the Yifei Torah's first answer that this is different because it's a makal fisha is like Tosfot's second answer given by Rabbeinu Tam and the Ri. But this was actually a little difficult for me what you just said, David Moshe, because how is healing, if there's women whose wounds are closed up, so how is that an external makkah? In other words,
it's a birth. It means the baby can come out.
Right.
It's not something inside. It's kind of something for the outside. Kind of.
I guess. I mean, Sarat, I understand.
It's not a disease. It's not a.
Okay. So then Sarat, then I would ask more on Sarat with Miriam. That is a disease, but it's external. All right. In other words, yeah. You give the answer. Okay. another kind of difficulty, right? We saw that in Bava Metzia, it has the one who davened for illness and recovers from it was Elisha, and in Bereshit Rabbah, it's Chizkiyahu. So the Marazu basically throws up his hands in the first source here on the second page. He says, "Umasha amru Chazal al Elisha shechala gimel cholaim." Elisha haya הרבה שנים קודם Chizkiyahu. In other words, you can't say that it was that Elisha and Chizkiyahu, because Elisha lived centuries before Chizkiyahu. So tzarich lomar she'Elisha lo chidesh she'aya minhag ba'olam ken ad Chizkiyahu. And when Elisha davened for it, it was just for himself, but not for the rest of the world. And Chizkiyahu was for the whole world. But he himself says, "V'tzarich iyun minayin l'chazal kazeh." He says, I don't really have a good explanation. Tzarich iyun, how we understand this. Okay. Good. I want to let's learn the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer here in Perek Nun Bet, where he expands on this midrash, and he frames it in the theological context of these are things that came into the world that didn't exist before. Where he says as follows: Shiva muftim Perek Nun Bet. Shiva muftim na'asu va'olam shelo nir'u chomotan. There were 7 wondrous things that kind of came into the world that had never been seen before. And he goes through a list. V'amofet hashlishi, the third out of the 7, miyom shenivru shamayim va'aretz lo haya adam shenizraka bo seva. There had never been a person who looked old. Ad sheba Avraham Avinu v'tamhu kol ha'olam shelo ra'u kamoto miyom shenivra olam. This is like what Yonah was saying before. Everybody said, what is this thing that he has white hair pitom? They'd never seen anything like that. Uminayin shenizraka seva shenamar v'Avraham zaken ba'ava yamim. Okay? רבי לויטס איש יבנה אומר, כחליל שהוא כבוד ראש המלך, ככה סבה, כבוד והדר זקנים. שנאמר והדר זקנים סבה. Right, so we saw this earlier, right, that old age, or the appearance of old age, white hair and beard, it's like a crown that is an honor for the head of the king. Right, it's something that's honorable. Hamofet HaRevi'i, what's the 4th thing? B'yom shenivra olam lo haya adam choleh, a person never got sick. Ela b'chol makom she'haya adam im b'derech im b'shuk ve'atash hayta nafsho yotzet min chirav umet. So it used to be that a person would, wherever he would be, whether he was on the road, in a journey, or in the marketplace, he would just sneeze, and then his soul would leave his body, and he would die on the spot. That's how the world used to work.
What?
You see just
If
people
you
walking.
sneeze, you die?
No.
Yeah. It used to be people would just die like this. Kacha.
That's why we say bless you.
Oh, ברוך שכיוונת.
Yeah.
Yeah? You'll see. עד שבא יעקב אבינו ביקש רחמים על זאת, ואמר לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, ריבונו של עולם, אל תיקח את נפשי ממני, עד אשר אני מצווה את בניי ובני ביתי, which is what we saw earlier. Give me a chance to get my affairs in order. ונותר לו, Hashem listened to him.
If you sneeze, you die?
It used to be that when you would sneeze, your soul would leave your body.
What
Yes.
soul?
Your neshama. Right?
Die. For
Because-
forever?
Yeah, because there was no sickness.
So people didn't sneeze that often.
Right. One time, to be precise.
Well, it doesn't say that every time someone would sneeze, they would die. It says they would die.
When
They
sneeze.
died, it was after sneezing.
Can you imagine? Like, oh,
Or it
okay,
could be an
I'm
expression like,
Yeah,
with
there
one
you go.
sneeze, they would just die.
Not every rectangle is a square, but every square is a rectangle.
Exactly. There we go.
Okay.
So every time they would sneeze, it would be like a sigh of relief that they're still around.
Good. So that's exactly.
Oh, mother, I'm about to sneeze.
All right. Exactly.
Not mother Zaka.
שנאמר, ויהי אחרי הדברים האלה, ויאמר ליוסף, הנה אביך חולה, ושמעו כל מלכי הארץ ותמהו. Again, everybody was shocked that Yaakov Avinu was deathly ill. שלא היה כמוהו יום שנבראו שמיים וארץ. Nothing like that had ever happened. לפיכך, חייב אדם לומר לחברו בשעת עתישותיו, חיים, שנהפך מוות העולם לאור, שנאמר עתישותיו תהל אור. That's why when somebody sneezes, you're supposed to say, Chaim, Lavriut, God bless. Because it used to be that when people would sneeze, they would not necessarily survive. So you still have that idea. And it says that custom, this gives the makor for that custom, okay? You could argue, by the way, here, right? Yaakov Avinu had this whole procession when he died, right? It talks about how all the kings saw it and they didn't understand what was going on. What was this whole procession for Yaakov Avinu? So this gives kind of another explanation. It wasn't just Stam that, okay, he was the father of the Mishneh LaMelech in Egypt, but also that his death was something that had never happened before in the way that it happened.
It's
Or
weird,
also that there
because
was time for people to come to the Levite, like people preparing to be there.
Right. In other words, there was such a big thing because that concept could never happen before.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
see, it's weird because you see there used to be doctors in Mitzrayim.
There used to be
So why
doctors
they
in
had
Mitzrayim.
doctors if there's no need to?
So that's what we saw before in Tosot Tifei Torah, that people could get sick and then heal, get better. Maybe the doctor. But it's
more
a
like
good question. If everyone would always
you
heal,
say it's more
so
like
why do you?
broken hands.
Yeah, things like that. You still need a doctor for things that you would heal from no matter what. Maybe the doctor can make it go faster. Also, we asked that with Avraham Stone. But this is the first time somebody
So you
got
want to tell me
deathly
till
ill.
then, people like, let's say Adam Arishon, he used to live for like 900 years.
Yeah.
People used to sneeze 900 years and just like, every time they're like, ah.
Yeah.
Till Yaakov came.
Yeah, that's what the Midrash says. Yeah.
What? At those days you would be able to live until whatever you want.
Not until whatever you want, but people would live a long time. Yeah.
Till you sneeze.
Okay, and then there's a few more signs. The fifth and the sixth sign are not related to our sugya, and then the seventh and final sign, Amofet Hashvi'i, Miyom Shnivru Shamayim V'Aretz Lo Yeh Adam Choleh V'Yichyeh V'Yamod Mechol Yom. Ad Sheba Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda B'Chaloto V'Yechi Mecholo.
Where is Yitzchak?
So here's Chizkiyahu. Sorry. Yitzchak. So look at what happens with Pirkei Eliezer. It combines the other two. Because in Bava Metzia there was no Yitzchak, and here there's no Yitzchak. But in Breshit Rabbah, it was Chizkiyahu at the end instead of Elisha, and here it's Chizkiyahu at the end instead of Elisha. Okay, so Pirkei Eliezer, it has Chizkiyahu like Breshit Rabbah, and it doesn't have Yitzchak like Bava Metzia. So it's kind of in between. Okay, and I want to just conclude here with this last Tanchumei Yomdeinu at the bottom, Toldot, that we can ask Avraham's request. It's chas v'shalom. You should suggest this, but his reasoning, especially in the framing of the Tanchum of Chayesar, where he says ve'eze yofi yeshli, and like everyone thinks I'm a spectacle. It's like almost the self. Kivyachol. It seems selfish. He's saying no one is honoring me. Everyone thinks I'm Yitzchak. Look at me. I look like a fool. Like, is Avraham concerned about those things? Is Avraham Avinu we're talking about? So perhaps this final midrash Tanchum Yomdeinu gives a bit more perspective on that. Okay, so it's talking about the story of David HaMelech. If you know the story with Naval and Avigail, right? There was this guy Naval who was a Rasha, and David wanted to get help from him. He wouldn't help him, and then eventually Naval's wife Avigail comes out and helps David, and Naval dies, and David marries Avigail. Okay. So it says, "Vayika aseret hayamim vayigof Hashem et Naval vayamot." Okay, so Hashem struck Naval down for its wickedness, and he dies. Miyad vayishlach David vayidaber b'Avigail lekachta l'Elisha. So once Naval dies, so David sends to bring, to propose to Avigail's hand in marriage. And now the midrash, that's psukim. Now the midrash says, "V'lecha shivia perash David mimena shlosha chodashim." So David would not be with her for 3 months. Kedei le'da im hayta me'uberet min Naval im lav. Right, and this is a halachic. This is the halacha as well. If you marry a widow, you have to wait 3 months to make sure that there's no confusion or safek about the identity of the father. Then, after 3 months, he was intimate with her and she became pregnant. So even though David took this precaution and waited 3 months, there were still people who somehow claimed, it's really the child of Naval. מה עשה הקדוש ברוך הוא? ציווה המלאך הממונה על יצירת הוולד ועל צורתו, ואמר לו, לך וצור אותו בדמות דוד אביו. So Hashem basically said, I want this child to look exactly like the father so that nobody can claim that David's not the father. Which is similar to what other midrashim that we didn't see here say, why did Yitzchak look exactly like Avraham? For a similar reason, because he was 100 years old and it was a miracle to kind of put any concerns that people might raise around whether Avraham was really Yitzchak's father. And we see a similar thing here with David. Okay? His second son was the product of this union, and his name was Kilav. Where did the name Kilav come from? In other words, he was just like David in appearance. Right? So that nobody can claim otherwise. וכן אברהם היה דומה ליצחק, ולא היו מכירים הבריות בין אב לבן, but nobody could tell them apart. עד שביקש אברהם ואמר, ריבון של עולם, הפרש בין אב לבן, please allow old age to come into the world so that there can be a differentiation between a father and a son. So again, like, why is this perhaps kind of a chidush in the sense that, yeah, maybe Avraham was concerned about his own kind of, people don't know if it's him or if it's Yitzchak, but his request was a request forever. In other words, what he was doing was also benefiting all future descendants and all future mankind, that there would never again be a situation where people wouldn't know who to honor. So his request, yeah, maybe it was his own personal experience that warranted it, but it also benefited David, who didn't have to make a similar request later, but his son Kilav.
But he didn't say anything about kavod. He just said, make sure that people recognize who's the son and who's the dad.
That's true, yeah, but why would that matter? So we saw another midrashim that his concern was kavod. I guess it doesn't say it explicitly in this one, but there's some motivation for him to ask, right? But from the fact that David did not have to daven, oh, my son Kilav looks just like me, no one is honoring me, it was all b'schut Avraham's tefillah, earlier on.
I think he says, Beit David, והמלך דוד זקן.
Bava Yamim.
בסוף.
Bava Yamim.
Yeah.
ולכן הוא הביא שם את אבישג השונמית שתחם לו.
נכון.
Right,
אז הוא היה נראה כמוהו אולי עד הגיל הזה.
Very interesting. So that's very good. The source for Avraham davening this way and aging, we find that same source by David, and I like it, you're tying into this midrash that they had a similar problem that needed to be addressed by physical aging, based on the Zaken Bava Yamim. Very good.